Hi, so in this video we're going to run through an authoritative restore of Active Directory. And so by saying it's authoritative, it's a little bit different than a regular restore. And it's authoritative because it marks objects as authoritative. It marks them by changing their version number. So there's a version number increase by 100,000. So every time an object is created, there is a timestamp, and there's a GUID that's created. And then as there's changes to that object, it's timestamped, and there's a version number. And so these domain controllers, the two, will replicate their changes to each other. It's multi-master replication, so as changes are made to objects, groups, users, whatnot, they replicate those changes. So in a regular working environment, if everything was okay and this domain controller happened to fail, that's alright because you have this other domain controller that can replicate its changes after this machine has been reinstalled or restored. You don't have to bring it completely up to date. You can just rely on the updates from the other domain controllers to bring it fully up to date. Okay, so it works well. You can have a server go down and users won't know the difference. And you can have a server completely fail and your Active Directory continues to work, so it's very resilient. But there's a problem that can happen with this replication, and that's when an object is deleted by mistake. So when you delete an object, that deletion gets replicated. So if I delete it here, it gets replicated everywhere. And that's great, that's how you would expect it to work. But if you did it by mistake, well, it's too late. As soon as you delete an item, it's going to replicate that change everywhere. And so you end up going to your backup. The backup allows you to go back and restore an object. And so you bring this machine up to date as far as the backup is concerned. Of course, the deletion occurred after because the object exists in the backup and then it was deleted afterwards. So the trouble is you restore the object and then replication occurs and the object gets redeleted. So it could be an OU containing hundreds of accounts. You restored it. It's just going to get deleted again unless you mark it as authoritative and increase the version number. So we're going to go through this process on RWDC01. We'll do a backup, we'll delete some objects that I've created ahead of time, and then we'll restore them using Windows Server Backup. Then we'll use ntds util. And ntds util has a series of commands to mark an object as authoritative. Alright, now to show this, to demonstrate it, we have to go ahead and create some objects to delete. So what I've created is an OU called auth restore. And I created some objects in it. So I created a Bob account. And I've created Bob's group. And I added Bob to Bob's group. And then I went ahead and I created a non-authoritative restore OU. I added Billy and Billy group. Of course, I added Billy to Billy group. And I also use the managers. You can tell what that is. That is managers. And so I've got this managers group, and I added Bob and Billy both to the managers group. Okay, so I'll delete auth restore, I'll delete this other group, or this other OU auth, non-auth restore, and I will mark this one as authoritative, the auth restore OU. And that will ensure that Bob and Billy's, or Bob's and Bob's group remain after replication with server 2. And this OU and all of its members will be deleted after replication. Now, it's important to create the groups and the users because if we test this and Bob gets restored and Bob's group gets restored, what about the group membership? Okay, so I've gone ahead and I added Billy to this group as well, right? And I added Bob to the Billy's group just to make things more complex, I guess. But in a work environment, you're going to have group memberships all over the place. So if you restore an OU and the users get restored, do the group memberships across your domain get restored as well? And some of them don't. Your backlinks don't get restored. It's your group memberships. So after the restore process is done, what the software does is it creates a backlinks LDF file. And LDF files can be imported with LDIFDE. Use an import command, specify the file, whatever the file is called, .ldf. And this has to be done when the domain controller is running. So you have to boot up normally to do this. Okay, so this is the order. We'll create the objects. And we'll do the backup. And delete them. Restore mode. We'll do the restore in restore mode. And then ntds util. So make sure after you do the restore that you don't reboot. If you reboot, then it's going to replicate with server 2 and you're going to lose all your objects. So use ntds util before you reboot to mark them as authoritative. Reboot normally. And then LDIFD. Alright. Well, let's take a look at that. I would recommend that you install a secondary hard disk on the VM that you're using. And the reason being is that you could store this backup on another domain controller. And that would work. But it takes up 10 gigs of space for the system state backup. So this 10 gigs of space, once you expand one of these virtual hard disks, they don't shrink. And you'll end up always taking up an extra 10 gigs of space. So I'm going to perform the backup on my RWDC, and I can select to add a new hard disk. Let's go ahead and add it. And I'll have to, when you add these, so this is 40 gigs in size, don't just say OK. You want to expand it out. And when you look through this, you can see that thick provisioned is selected by default. Okay, so we go through here, make sure it's not still thick provisioned, that it is thin provisioned. It's a 40 gig hard drive. If you pick thick provisioned, it's going to be 40 gigs in size as soon as you hit OK, which we don't want because we only need to use 10 gigs of space. In a working environment, you would make it use the 40 gigs right away. That way you're not worried that you're going to run out of disk space. You're allocating it immediately, and it's actually more efficient that way because it just doesn't need to dynamically expand. Okay, so make sure you win. Select thin provisioned, and OK. It's going to add this virtual machine hard disk, and I'll go back into the VM. Alright, so I want to go into computer management since I added a new drive. It won't be formatted. Okay, so it's offline. Bring that drive online. And then initialize the disk. Master boot record's fine. And I'll format it. Quick format's fine. I'll call it backups. Okay, so now I have a drive E. Store my backups. The backup software won't let you store the backup on the local drive. So you either have to store it on a network location, which will work, right? We could put in the UNC path to server 2, but you can also store it on a USB drive or a secondary hard disk. I already formatted it, didn't I? There you go. Alright, so now we bring up the backup manager. And this is a feature, right? You'll have to install the feature ahead of time, Windows Server Backup. It's not installed by default. Okay, I got a couple of successful backups before. Let's run backup once. Different options selected, no other option. And I don't want a full server backup. So make sure you select custom. You have to add items, and you can see there's some options here. System state is the one we want. Back up the registry, remove files. It includes your NTDS database and like everything, your IS settings, DNS settings, your certificate authority, all be part of the system state. As I said before, it'll be about 10 gigs in size. Pick local drives. You'll select the backup disk. You can see that it's either a backup drive or a DVD drive. So your C drive is not an option. Backup. And this will take 20 minutes, 25 minutes to finish. So I'm going to just stop the video for a bit. Alright, so the backup has completed successfully. Let's close this. And if we take a look at Active Directory users and computers, we see the groups and the OUs that I'd mentioned before. So I have an auth restore OU, Bob, Bob's group, and the members are Bob and Billy. Non-auth restore OU is there as well. So, and before I delete these, I'll switch over to server 2. And you just want to make sure that replication has completed successfully to truly test your marking of the authoritative objects. There, so there's an auth restore and non-auth restore. So it's done. I can delete these. Delete the auth restore and the groups will be gone. And, oops, delete this as well. Okay, so they're both gone. And I'll go back to RWDC and refresh the screen. Delete, and replication has completed, and they're both deleted from this domain controller as well. So they're gone. And let's say we made a mistake. So we want to restore these from backup. Of course, if you've got the deleted folder turned on in Active Directory, then you wouldn't need to go back and restore these from a backup. If you use the Active Directory Administrative Center. Okay, so I'll go into here to Bacon deleted objects, and I can see all the objects are here. So if you have this enabled, then you could just restore them right here. But that's new to 2012, and you might not have had it enabled. So let's say that you don't. and you have to go back and do an authoritative restore. So you could reboot the server and go into Active Directory restore mode at this point by pressing F8. You could also just type msconfig and just to make sure that it boots into restore mode, select safe boot, Active Directory repair. I'll apply this, and when I reboot, it'll boot into Active Directory restore mode automatically, and I'll need the Active Directory restore mode password to log in. So whatever password you set during the Active Directory installation to make this a domain controller, you need to remember what that directory service restore mode password was. And this is a persistent setting, so you'll need to come back into msconfig and set this, turn it off when you're in safe mode. I'll just wait for this to reboot. So it's booted into safe mode. If I try to log in now as the Bacon administrator, you can see it has safe mode written all over it. We'll just open the Windows Server backup and do a restore whenever this finishes loading. Alright, so there's the most recent backup is here. Let's choose to recover. Recover this server. Current backup. It'll find the location. If you backed it up to a network location, it will recognize the network location here. Want to restore the system state. You have to restore the system state back to the same server that you backed it up on. If you were to restore the system state to a different server, when you reboot it, it'll have the original server's name. For the server name, it'll overwrite everything in the registry. Okay, so it's for this specific server. And I'll choose the original location. There's an option here to perform an authoritative restore of the Active Directory files. You could do this, and if you do, it'll mark everything as authoritative. And so all the OUs will be sent back out. Maybe you want that, but in this scenario, I want to pick a specific OU and the users and groups within that OU, and let everything else get deleted again. And for that to occur, I have to use ntdsutil and mark a specific OU as authoritative. So I won't select that box. Just leave it as original location, click Next. It says this recovery option will cause all replicated content in the local server to resynchronize active recovery. Potentially have latency or outage issues. So it's just saying I will have to replicate with other domain controllers to bring it fully up to date. There's an option to automatically reboot the server. You don't want that either. If you reboot the server without marking the files or the objects as authoritative, then they will get deleted. It cannot be paused or cancelled once it's started. You'll need to restart the server to complete the recovery process. Yeah, sure. So this will recover about 8 gigs. That was in the backup. Take another 25 minutes. Okay, so the restore is completed, and Windows Server has given me this insane message. I don't know what this is supposed to mean, but I'll just assume it says backups completed successfully. Press OK to continue. Isn't that something that it went ahead and restarted? But I have it selected to boot into Active Directory Restore mode because of the msconfig setting. So that's the only thing that's going to save me, because otherwise, if it booted up successfully, just normally, and replication would occur, then I would lose all of my restored OUs. That would suck. I'd have to do this demo over. So the server's just finished booting up. Let's log in again. If you're watching this video before actually doing the lab, so I would say that not to push that button. But if you did and you have msconfig configured, that's all right. So system state recovery operation that started at a certain time has successfully completed. Great. So press enter. Still in safe mode, so I still have the opportunity to mark those OUs authoritative. Just wait for this to finish loading. So I want the command prompt with the admin, and it's ntds util. That changes the prompt. You can hit question mark to see what your options are. You can see one of these is the authoritative restore. Where is it? Yeah, so authoritative restore is right at the top, of course. And there's also this activate instance. And there's another list instances. So when you go to do the authoritative restore, it's going to ask you which instance do you want in case you have NTDS and you also have the lightweight directory service running. So you could type list instances and you'll see just the one instance of NTDS that you have on your domain controller. So you have to activate the instance NTDS to have it selected. And then you can do authoritative restore and question mark. If I could spell. How do you spell authoritative? Did I spell it wrong twice? Authoritative. Let's see the typo. You? Maybe I can't put a question mark. Oh, that's what it is. So you type authoritative restore, changes the prompt. Alright. Took me a while. And so you go through here and it says restore object or restore subtree. And then you can have a version increase and you can specify the version increase number. I want to restore a subtree. I want to restore an entire OU. So I'll say restore subtree and put in the distinguished name of the OU that I want to restore, which was that was an OU equals auth restore. Okay, so the domain controller is booted up. So I'm on RWDC. Just open Server Manager and then open Active Directory using computers. I just want to see what's here. So see the auth restore is here, but there is no non-auth restore OU. So just the OU that we marked out, authoritative is here. Bob's count, Bob's group. Open Bob's group, and the membership has Bob, but Billy's gone because Billy never got restored. We open the Moncton OU where the managers group is. Becky's here, and there's Bob. So his group membership is correct. That's exactly as it was before without the backlinks file. There's no need to run it in this case. Just open it up though. Where is it? Administrator documents. Expected to see it right here. Alright, well, it's got to be here somewhere. First rule of system administration, know which directory you're currently working in. I assumed I was in the administrator directory, but I couldn't have been. Directory, include all subdirectories. It began with AR, ends in LDF. So I'll just do a search for the entire C drive. And there it is. Windows System 32, alright, well that makes sense. Oops. Let us go to that directory. Let's open it first. Okay, so when we take a look at the file, you can see that it's looking at the managers group. It shows the GUID for the managers group. Distinguished number or name. And to change type is to modify the membership of Bob, which is to delete the membership. Then re-add. Re-adds Bob as a member. The same group. Deletes the membership for the Bob's group. Adds membership of Bob to the group again. Interesting. The Billy group is gone, however, because it got deleted. And remain deleted. Okay, so it's not necessary to run this command because the only membership that it's changing relates to the groups that don't exist. If we did want to run it, LDIFD question mark gives you the options for LDIFDE, and so simple import to the current domain is I to import, then the file. Import file AR 4 entries modified successfully. It's going to generate some errors because it can't locate those groups or the group Billy's group, but it would have modified entries relating to the manager's group and Bob's group. But in the end, It's still Bob. That's it. That's how you do an authoritative restore. Good luck.